On February 19th, 1980, the music stopped. The frontman of the biggest rising rock band in the world was found dead in a parked car. The cause was acute alcohol poisoning, compounded by a freezing London winter. For almost any other band, this is the end of the road. But ACDC didn't just survive, no, they pulled off the greatest comeback in music history. And the wildest part was the man who saved the band was handpicked by the very singer who had just died. So let's rewind a bit. By January 1980, ACDC is on a massive, unstoppable run. They are halfway through their massive Highway to Hell tour, and they are truly becoming rock royalty. And at the center of this hurricane is Bon Scott. He is the band's engine, the social architect, but the rock and roll lifestyle comes with a heavy price. The schedule is brutal, filled with endless tour bus rides and relentless recording demands. Malcolm and Angus Young are already in a drafty London rehearsal space, building the next album. Bon is right there pushing through the burnout, hopping on the drum kit to help them lock in arrangements for new tracks. But on the night of February 18th, Bon hits the Music Machine Club in Camden to blow off some steam, and he drinks heavily. He gets too drunk to stand, and he's carried out to a friend's Renault 5, and then left in the freezing dark to sleep it off. But sadly, he never wakes up. At just 33 years old, Bon Scott was gone, and the band was completely devastated. Tours were immediately canceled, and the amps were switched off, and ACDC is effectively over. But just 2 weeks later, the band stands in Fremantle, Australia for Bon's funeral, and they expect this to be the end. But Bon's father, Chick Scott, pulls Malcolm and Angus aside. He looks them in the eyes and tells them Bon would have hated seeing them moping around. He insists they carry on. And with the grieving father's blessing, keeping the band alive suddenly becomes a matter of honor. Management immediately starts pushing a list of names, desperate to smoothly replace Bon before the commercial momentum dies. They audition guys like Noddy Holder from Slade and Buzz Shear, but absolutely nothing clicks. Then a memory sparks. Years earlier, Bon had seen a singer named Brian Johnson performing with a band called Gordy. Bon had raved to the Young Brothers about Brian, saying he was a maniac rolling around on the floor screaming his head off. Bon thought it was the greatest Little Richard impression he had ever seen. But what Bon didn't know at the time was that Brian wasn't actually putting on a show. He was suffering from a brutal attack of appendicitis. And by 1980, Brian Johnson had given up on his rock star dreams. He was 32 years old, completely broke, separated from his wife, and living with his parents in Newcastle. He was running a small windshield repair business and genuinely believed he was past his sell-by date. Then a mysterious woman with a German accent called to invite him to an audition in London, and he actually refused. He tells her he can't afford to just pop down to London, you see. So what finally gets him down there? Well, a vacuum cleaner. Just an hour later, a producer calls offering him 350 quid to sing a commercial jingle for a Hoover vacuum. So he actually sings about the high-powered mover from Hoover, and he takes his cash and realizes this pays his train fare down south. Brian arrives early, grabbing a cup of tea and a pastry at a local pie shop where the crust is so rock hard he thinks the baker used to work as a welder. He eventually walks across the street and straight into rock history. When Brian steps into the studio, he doesn't act like a nervous wreck. He grabs a Newcastle brown ale and plays a casual game of pool with the roadies. And when he finally steps into the booth, he belts out Tina Turner's Nutbush City Limits. The energy is electric. Less than 7 weeks after Bon Scott died, Brian Johnson is officially announced as the new frontman of ACDC. There is zero time for a victory lap, though. The band immediately flies to Compass Point Studios in the Bahamas to record the new album. But this place is far from paradise. They're trapped in a dead-sounding, low-ceiling room surrounded by local drug dealers, armed with machetes and 6-foot fishing spears to protect their gear. But this suffocating pressure cooker creates diamonds as a massive tropical storm rolls in, turning the Nassau sky purple and shaking the studio with thunder. Brian channels the chaos. He scribbles the lyrics to Hell's Bells in a single night as rain hammers the roof. To honor Bon, they commission a custom 2,000-pound bronze bell. After a disastrous attempt to record a real church bell that gets ruined by fluttering pigeons in the belfry, they record the custom bell and slow the tape to half speed. This drops the pitch a full octave, creating a haunting, supernatural funeral knell. Near the end of the sessions, the label demands one more track. In a frantic 15-minute dash, Brian and the brothers write "Rock and Roll Ain't Noise Pollution," and it's a middle finger to the critics and a massive statement of intent. So ACDC faced the ultimate band-killing dilemma. How do you replace a guy who's the very symbol of your sound? Bon Scott was a rock and roll icon. The transition only worked because Bon essentially scouted his own replacement, and if Angus hadn't recalled Bon's old story about Brian's appendicitis-fueled performance, the band very well could have died in 1980. So Bon Scott saved ACDC from beyond the grave, and their comeback was a complete cultural reset. When Back in Black dropped in July of 1980, Atlantic Records was terrified of the completely black album cover. They call it commercial suicide. Instead, it becomes the most iconic mourning shroud in music history. The album goes on to sell 50 million copies, becoming the second best-selling album of all time. It transcended the heavy metal genre completely. It proved that with grit, honor, and raw talent, a band could survive the worst possible tragedy and rewrite the rules of rock. But the ultimate victory didn't happen on the Billboard charts. It happened in Sydney, Australia, at the end of their world tour. Brian Johnson finally met Bon Scott's mother, Isa. She looked at the broke windshield repairman from Newcastle, who had bravely stepped into her dead son's shoes, and she told him simply, Bon would have been proud of him. The resurrection was complete.